So our topic today is teaching during COVID, lessons from the fall from our assessments teachers. I'm Brian Story, one of the teacher engagement managers at Assessments. I'll get a little bit more into introductions in just a minute. Our goal for today's session is that participants will learn valuable tips and lessons for how to address the challenges of remote and hybrid learning using assessments. To sort of meet that goal, we're going to start with a brief overview of assessments. Then we're going to dive into our featured presenters today, which I'm really excited about. Then we'll have a chance for Q&A where we'll sort of highlight some questions coming into the chat and respond to those, have our presenters respond to those. And then we'll have a sort of discussion question where folks can share their own thoughts so that we can bring those together for the group. And then we'll wrap up. A few notes on webinar etiquette and Zoom norms here. Please keep your microphone on mute. You can feel free to share your video. Both of those controls are in the bottom left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. And then, as I said before, if you have questions, wonderings, or ideas that you'd like to share throughout the webinar, feel free to click that chat icon in the bottom center of your Zoom window. So like I said, I'm Brian Story. I'm a teacher engagement manager at Assessments. Prior to this work, I was a public school teacher in Washington, D.C. And Norfolk Public Schools in Virginia. I'm a proud graduate of American University and the College of William and Mary, and I'm now located in Durham, North Carolina. So shout out to any of my North Carolina people if you're in the room. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dawn.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Peterson. I'm a teacher engagement manager as well, along with Brian. I taught 8th grade math for 14 years here in Massachusetts. Holla to my Massachusetts people in the house. And I use Assessments for 10 years in my classroom. So I'm going to be on the chat today. So anything that comes up that you're wondering about or have a question, please throw it in the chat and I'll get to it for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dawn. So what is Assessments? We are a forever free tool that allows teachers to enhance the curricula they already use by assigning online in a way that gives students immediate feedback on their as they progress and gives teachers detailed actionable data that they can use. We seamlessly integrate with Google Classroom and Canvas, especially important during this remote environment, but also super useful when you're in the classroom. Why Assessments? We are a research-proven tool. We're one of only 3 middle school math interventions with a strong rating from Evidence for ESSA, which we're really proud of. In our experiment to test Assessments' efficacy, we found that 75% more learning happened in classrooms using Assessments when compared to the learning that normally happens in a year. In addition, we found that teachers who used Assessments reliably changed their classroom practices. And also that Assessments began to close the achievement gap in those classrooms. Students with lower prior achievement earned an equivalent of 2 years of math learning in a single year. So very excited to sort of share that and share our tool with you. Typically, when we think about Assessments, we talk about the 4 steps of Assessments. Step 1, which is creating an assignment by selecting problems and assigning those to Google or Canvas. Assisting students through immediate feedback as they're answering their questions. Assessing class performance by analyzing that assignment report data or details report data, and then analyzing answers together by pulling out key points from the data and sharing those with students and designing instructional moves based on that data. Why this topic? So we know that teachers have faced myriad challenges since last spring when there was this shift from remote to hybrid learning. We also know that teachers have had to go back and forth between in-person, hybrid, remote, and things are kind of very dynamic, right? On top of the already dynamic classroom environment that teachers manage on a regular basis, right? To meet those challenges, teachers and teacher coaches have developed lots of different innovative strategies to provide high quality instruction and support student learning. And so our hope today is that we can inspire you with perspectives on meeting these challenges from fellow Assessments teachers and coaches. And with that, we're going to move on to our featured presenters. So just a bit of setup here. I'm happy to welcome Donnelly Tigner, who is a former high school math teacher, is currently a professor at Fitchburg State University in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and is an illustrious assessments coach and expert. And then Ajoki Bevins, who's a 6th and 7th grade math teacher at Hess K through 8 school in Savannah, Georgia. So very happy to have them join us today. As a note, when we get into the presentations, feel free to chat any questions, wonderings, or ideas that come to mind. You can feel free to @ the presenter's name if there's a specific presenter you want to direct your question or wondering to. And our chat moderator, Dawn, is going to track those questions and share themes during the Q&A portion of the webinar. So definitely feel free to share any questions, ideas, or wonderings that you have. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Donnelly.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, my name is Donnelly Tigner, and I've been teaching for over 28 years. I retired in 2019 from Monty Tech, which was a vocational school in Central Mass, where I was department liaison as well as a school-wide data team coordinator. Currently, I'm working as an assistant teacher, trainer, mentor, and a professor at Fitchburg State University, where I teach graduate level courses online to teachers as part of the curriculum and teaching master's program. And since the pandemic began, I've had teachers in my classes from mainland China to Turkey to even a remote village in Alaska. And this has given me quite a unique perspective as to some of the struggles that teachers are currently facing across the globe. And although there are many differences in teaching situations, many of the struggles are the same. Next slide, please. What makes assessments so useful is the fact that there is no one size fits all way to use it. So whatever way that you choose to use assessments, it should fit naturally into your unique teaching style and not the other way around. The majority of teachers that I currently coach are teaching remotely or in a hybrid situation, and they're using assessments in many different ways. In DC, teams of teachers are creating and building their own exit tickets. In California and Georgia, teachers use skill builders to assess prerequisite skills at the start of a unit and then monitor progress of their students throughout the unit. A teacher in Georgia is reassigning the same skill builder multiple times and having his students track their own progress and growth. And others are using the open educational resources for homework or to complete work during class time. So within the same school, different teachers could be using assessments in different ways. Next slide, please. No matter what way teachers are using assessments, for those teaching virtually, one struggle in particular kept emerging. So how can we mirror what we used to do in small groups in the classroom in a virtual environment? And most of us by this point have become relatively familiar with Zoom. And if you've tried breakout rooms before in the past, it may have gone something like this. So you set the students off on their task in their rooms and you pop in and out only to find the students muted, disengaged, and just waiting for the allotted time to pass. Or maybe your district doesn't allow unsupervised breakout rooms. And I'd like to pause here and just clarify that all of the materials that I will be sharing with you today can be used to create groups through shared documents without using breakout rooms as well. So you can modify them as you see fit or use them as is. The challenge in both cases is the same. And how can we structure virtual group work situations to not only be more engaging and productive, but to support students in making their thinking visible and be more accountable for their learning? Next slide, please. When the pandemic hit, teachers' inboxes were flooded with resources. I'm sure all of you can relate to this. And information was certainly not lacking, but teachers didn't have the time then and still don't to research and explore these resources. So throughout this presentation, I'll be providing you with all of the ready-made materials needed to implement this strategy in your class tomorrow, as the title states, a breakout room in a box. Next slide, please. In the fall, many instructors cited difficulties with security issues like students changing their names. And many of these issues can be proactively prevented. I've included some links here for some protocols that you can click in and out of to really take care of some of these issues. And Zoom etiquette in a virtual learning environment is just as important as class management is in a face-to-face situation. A list of rules for students is a great idea so that everyone knows the expectations and is on the same page. And I've included a linked ASCD ready-made list, which you can use as it is, or you can use it to create ideas of your own. And you may even want to involve your students in this process. But you're going to want to review all the Zoom tool features that you will be using with your students, and you'll need to leave enough time for them to be modeling and practice. The more comfortable that students are with the platform, the more apt they are to participate. Next slide, please.
And Donnelly, I'll just share, because there's a lot of links on this page, that the follow-up email will include a slide deck, so you can click into all these links and explore them as you go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So in these group situations, students need to define purpose. And so even more than that, they might need some support when they don't know how to proceed. So linked at the bottom of the slide is a Google Doc of student role information, which you can copy and provide to your students. And Brian, can you click on that, please?
Yes, 1 second.
And these roles should be reviewed and modeled by you prior to the activity. Or we can go back to it if it'll be easier to do it after. Whatever.
Well, I'm struggling with getting the presentation options at the bottom without the Zoom thing popping up.
We can go back to it. We can go back to it because they're on this slide as well. So there is a Google Doc that you can copy and make your own, but what's on that slide of the roles, oh, he's got it, yay. Okay, so each student role shown here has a description of the responsibilities for each role, as well as relevant question prompts that can assist students if they get stuck during the task to help them remain productive. Now, when you're assigning roles to your students, you're going to want to start with student strengths, if you know them, to increase the student's level of comfort. And when forming groups, you always want to provide an opt-out option to stay in the main room if you're using breakout rooms. Unlike the traditional face-to-face classroom where students would be connecting with each other and forming relationships throughout the school year, students in the virtual classroom, they might feel that their classmates are strangers, and that may cause them a high level of anxiety. So be mindful of that. And once the groups are created, allow students the time to be comfortable with their groups and don't change them up too often. So now, after the students understand the purpose and responsibilities of each of the 4 roles, what makes the breakout rooms more interactive? And next slide. Interactive checklists on a shared slide will take it one step further in holding students accountable for actually fulfilling their assigned role in the group. And you'll see that each task on the checklist is linked to those responsibilities that you just saw on the Google Doc for each of the student roles. And students would be required to check off, or they could highlight them if it's easier for them, to track their own progress through the breakout room or group work session. And this checklist would also be reviewed by you, the teacher, prior to the activity. Next slide. Whoops.
No worries. So I just wanted to pause here for a moment and see if we have any questions or wonderings so far. And with that, Dawn, do we have any questions coming in?
No questions have come up so far.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Hey, we can always address any at the end too. So suggestions for use, and there are so many options here when using ASSISTments, depending on the need. So a few of the possibilities include completing a problem set or an error analysis of ASSISTments data, or revisiting an especially troublesome problem. But for this presentation, I'm going to highlight and show examples of how to use an ASSISTments problem set with all the components of breakout room in a box. So next. First, you're going to choose an existing problem set from ASSISTments, or if you're more experienced and feel comfortable doing so, you can build one. But building is certainly not necessary, as there are so many content resources readily available. When choosing the appropriate assignment, you want to be mindful of the length of the assignment, as well as the requirements of each of the student roles, because you want to make sure that the problem set is rich enough and complex enough for all members of the group to participate. So as an example, I shortened the first link one there, and I don't know if it's going to be okay for you to click into those, Brian, but if you can, the first assignment, and it was a very lengthy assignment on the first link. And I did not want all of that because that's not going to serve my purpose. And I actually found the question that I wanted at the very end. So by simply shortening the assignment by clicking on the box of that problem with the graph there, I created the assignment that I wanted. So the next link is my assignment when I clicked on that link. Okay, so that shortened version of only one problem with multi-parts, that included all the topics, and it's the length that I wanted for this particular group activity. So I would also recommend on the day of the actual assignment, after you've chosen this, you do like a practice problem set, like a little mini problem set to serve as a trial run. So this is the set that Brian has up on the screen now. That's what I want my students to do. That's the ultimate goal. But in getting there, in this particular assignment, they have to know how to upload an image. So I'm going to use that idea of uploading an image as my mini task the day before to practice, so that students can practice their roles and that I can make sure that they understand all the tools that will be necessary on what I'm going to call game day when they do this problem set. So this is going to give them practice with all of that. Okay, so now if you take the time to do this ahead of time, it's going to really eliminate a lot of problems later. So the upload an image mini problem set, which is right there, Brian, yeah. I also selected one problem off of a longer assignment on how to, this is a nice practice assignment that's been added on the ASSISTments website and for students to practice all the tools in ASSISTments. So this particular one will give them practice, and then I'll know they know how to upload an image, and I'm going to use that as like my little trial run for a group activity.
Yeah, can I just pause here, Donnelly?
Sure.
Because I want to share out, I'm going to put in the chat the student practice problem set that she's referring to.
Sure.
We have a user resource, and it does have these practice problem sets, which you can use that go through uploading pictures and whatnot. So I'm going to put that in the chats just so everyone knows where that is.
Absolutely. Okay. And next slide, please. So this particular slide here is directions. You're going to want to provide clear directions. And here are some sample directions for that practice trial run that we were just looking at, that upload an image. And so as you can see, I'm requiring all students to complete their individual work through ASSISTments. So every student is doing that problem set of uploading their own image onto ASSISTments. And they're also going to share through using their roles and completing the checklist and using the group slide. And I'll show you that in a second. So individual work on ASSISTments is going to make the student thinking visible and keep them engaged and hold them individually accountable for completing the work, even if they're presenting out their results. And the checklist is going to hold them accountable to the responsibility of their assigned role in the group. Next slide, please. So this is a shared slide that I created to go along with that uploading an image problem set. So I would want students to document and share out any difficulties that they had with any of the platforms or any part of this prior to the next day doing that graphing problem set group activity. So don't forget to include a reasonable time limit. And remember, because students are completing this on ASSISTments, you're going to be able to see how they're progressing through the allotted time and make adjustments by looking at that class assignment report. So if you look at the assignment report, you're going to know, do you need to give them more time? Can you cut the time short? So it gives you that little extra window in. Next slide, please. here's the sample slide of the graph problem set, which would come the next day. And remember that all students, again, are going to complete their work individually on assessments and record and share out their agreed upon answers with the class through the shared slide. So when you're choosing the problem sets, you're going to look for those rich, open-ended problems that are going to promote discussion. So that graph problem set that I chose really was one where students had to pick a situation to suit the graph. So that means that each group is probably going to come up with a different situation, leading to a great discussion, whether they're right or wrong as well. Next slide. Having students reflect on their learning is the final piece of the puzzle. And this was not only going to help to enhance learning, but provide an important insight to you, the instructor, into possible misconceptions and difficulties. So I created this feedback survey on Google Forms. And Brian, can you click on that too as well? Sorry, it's a lot of clicking. So it's a Google form and it has the student roles on it. And the students would be commenting on how they felt about the role, which is going to give you information as to their comfort level and if you have to move things around a little bit. And they're rating their group and what they learned from their group and what they learned from other groups and any other feedback. So from the results of this survey and all that assessment data that you're getting, you can give individual, small group, or whole class feedback on student work. Okay, next slide. And the next slide is just a group of some of the shared slide resources that you can click into and copy and use as your own. So next slide. So just really like a recap is going to be before you do the breakout room activity, or if you're not doing a breakout room activity and they're all in the same room, but you're going to separate them into groups having shared documents, you're going to want to review, model, and practice all the components. Then assign your groups and your roles. Make sure the students have their own copy of that role and prompt question to keep on hand for all these sessions. Assign the assessments problem set, and then copy whatever you're going to do with any of those shared documents like I showed you examples of. Next slide, please. And then you're going to check to see that all the needed on the actual day of the task, this would be the graphing, and my example would be the graphing task. You're going to check to make sure that all the Zoom features are enabled, they're working. You're going to go over the instructions, address any questions that came up the day before, assign the students into their breakout rooms either in advance or on the day of the activity. And now when you pop in and out of those rooms, you can monitor what's going on, the group dynamics and the student progress, but you also have that assignment report through assessments. So you can look at that and see that one of your students is not progressing as fast as they should be. And you can privately message them and tell them, you know, to get going, or pop into the group and motivate them and give them a little bit more encouragement there. You can also check those shared group slides in the checklist to monitor the progress of the groups. And then after the breakout activity, you're going to have them share out their results, which I think is the most fun part of this activity and where the most learning takes place, and then have them complete and submit their feedback form that you can further use to provide them with feedback. Next slide, please. And then afterwards, you're going to analyze all of your data as you would do and look for possible issues. Sometimes there are problems that are needs of improvement in both the activity itself, or sometimes content misconceptions, could be either. And then revise the activity for the next time as needed. And that's all of it. Thank you for your time. Shoo.
Excellent. That was wonderful, Donnelly. We really appreciate that. I just want to highlight a couple of things. I know that Dawn has shared some useful links in the chat, including a direct link to the breakout in a box. If you're on our website, you can find that by going to our teacher corner. And then you can go down here to, once the website finishes loading, there we go. You can go down here to the teacher toolkit for the month. And in this toolkit, we have some important resources, related tutorials that you might find useful, blog posts that align with our monthly theme, which again, this month is lessons learned from COVID. And under new downloads, you can access the breakout room in a box materials by clicking this button. In addition, I wanted to also highlight, and hopefully this will work depending on how I'm logged in here. I clicked the wrong one. Oh, there we go. All right. So just to show you really quickly, doesn't really matter. Okay. So Donnelly referenced the student practice assignments. And so we do have those available here in this main folder when you log into your account under student practice assignments. And here we have a practice assignment just getting students familiar with the basics of working in assessments. And so that's going to walk them through the basics. And then we also have the student practice assignment, which Donna Lee referenced, which is answering open response questions, where you can have students practice whatever routine you've set with them to take and upload pictures of their work, etc. Just get them familiar with that portion of the platform.
Brian, can you actually click into Donna Lee's breakout in a box? Because I know that Donna Lee has shared this resource with other teachers already. So you guys you got the experienced Donna Lee presenting this topic. But one of the teachers was asking kind of about, like, is sharing all these slides with students a logistical nightmare? And the answer is absolutely not. And if you click into those interactive breakout slides, Brian, just to kind of show teachers how to use this, actually, if you go back and it's the bottom right-hand box and just click on that link. So this is a slide deck that you can make a copy of and actually share out with students. And you'll just let the students know, like, breakout group 1 is going to be the green slides, breakout room 2 is going to be the pink slides, etc. And everyone in the class can use that same slide deck. So you don't have to make separate decks for every class and every student, which sounds terrible. And it is, Donna Lee has thought of everything.
That's true in this respect. And if you do want to separate them into groups and you don't have too many groups to do, you can do them in sets with links so that they can't see each other's answers. The only disadvantage to them all being on the slide deck is that they can kind of see what people are typing in. But I don't think that that's always a bad thing. So that might promote conversation in some of the groups.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so definitely feel free to check out these resources. And even as we continue through the webinar, if you have questions about or wonderings about what Donna Lee shared today or the breakout room in a box, feel free to share those in the chat. And Dawn is going to track those questions and share some of those out loud during the Q&A as well. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Ajoki.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, again, my name is Ajoki Bevins, and I am a 6th and 7th grade math teacher here in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. And I teach at Herman W. Hess K-8 school. We have a student population of about 1,200 students. By the way, I just started talking. Everybody can hear me just fine, correct?
Absolutely. You're doing great.
All right, thank you. So amongst our student population, we have a 50% Caucasian population, 20% African American, 18% Hispanic, and then 7% other. I personally have been teaching remotely since March of 2020. However, 50% of our teacher population went back into the building in October of 2020. And then in January of this year, 2021, I would say 95% of our teacher population are back in the building. But we only have a 50% student population back in the building on a 3-day, 2-day rotation. So we have like a hybrid model happening right now. I just want to show a little snippet of, can you just go back for a second? That video, yeah, I just want to just kind of show you my school. 30 seconds, Brian, and then cut it off. Can you? I don't hear any sound, but it's okay. There it is. That's my principal. there, Brian. That is such Hess is a wonderful school to work at. So guys, here is my assessments routine. I use Pear Deck to teach my lessons. When I first started out the academic year, I wasn't using Pear Deck, but I wasn't getting a whole lot of student engagement, and I had to find something. And by October, I learned about Pear Deck, and so I've been using it. And I usually have about 5 slides for my Pear Deck. My first slide, as you can see, will have my lesson outcomes for that particular day. And I pre-record like an instructional video, which is also on that first slide. And so when we come to class, I don't just say, here's the video, start watching. I start playing it, and then I stop and probe to gauge for like understanding. So that's usually my first slide. And then on the second slide, you'll see a guided practice question that we will go through together as a whole class. So I just want to also say, if I didn't mention this just now, that we only have 30 minutes together, and that we only meet with our students 4 days out of a 5-day week. So our students don't have classes on Wednesdays. So with only 4 days a week and 30 minutes, time is so precious. I just have one guided practice that we go through after watching the instructional video. And then on my third slide is where you'll see my assessments links, and I assign this to them every day. Usually it's about 2 to 3 questions. Sometimes one question, just depends on like how many parts there is to it, but they'll click on the assessments link on that third slide and complete the assignment. Some days we have time to complete it in class. Other days they'll complete it at home. And then on my fourth slide is the essential question. And then on the last slide, I'll have a lesson summary of that particular lesson that day. Now, I have it all together now, but back in March when COVID first hit, I did not. I teach Eureka Math to 6th and 7th graders. And if you teach Eureka, you know Eureka is content rich and everything is in a packet. So my students had binders and we flipped through the pages every day. And so COVID comes around and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I did not know how to take that packet and make it digital, but I tried so hard. So basically I was frantic in the spring of 2020, kind of not knowing what to do, and making my lessons digital was just taking up so much of my time. So I later learned about ASSISTments. One of my friends had a friend that was using ASSISTments and told me, well, hey, ASSISTments has Eureka that is already digitized for you. You don't have to create anything. So I'm like, oh, well, great. Let me go find some YouTube videos online. Let me let them watch the YouTube video. Let me assign them some assessments, and boom, good, I'm done. And as far as I was concerned, I had a successful a successful end to that COVID thing that happened in March of 2020. So over the summer, you can go on to the next right here. So over the summer, I learned that ASSISTments was offering a PLC, and I was like, well, I'm already using it. Let me see, what this PLC has to offer. So I basically signed up for it. Again, as far as I was concerned, ASSISTments was only just a tool for me to just assign kids to complete work digitally. I didn't look at it for anything else. But then via the PLC, I learned that it has so much more. There's so much more that you can do with ASSISTments. And so you can go on to the next slide. Oh, in the beginning, oh my gosh. Once you assign your ASSISTments assignments, guys, when you go back and you're looking at the report, in the beginning for me, I was like, whoa, I think you have to kind of keep clicking on it and it will pop up.
Here it goes.
Yeah.
I was like, where is it?
Right. So in the beginning, like looking at those reports, I was like Olaf here with my head like turned upside down. Like, what is it that I'm looking at? Like, again, I just wanted to assign something for them to complete an assignment. And so because I didn't really know what I was looking at, I was confused. And so I just looked for the average score and I was done. You can go on to the next slide. So when I first started using it in 2020, when my report popped up, guys, I only looked at this average score column. I just pretty much looked at that. I said, okay, well, this is what they scored. I may give them a few points here and there. And that's essentially what I put into the grade book. But Oh, and also, you can go to the next slide. With these reports, I didn't even realize that there was even a detailed student report. And with these detailed student reports, I look at them from time to time, but especially if I have a kid that wants some tutorial on something, I will open this up and I will say, okay, well, you didn't spend this much time. You didn't spend that much time on this particular question. You kind of rushed through it. Let's try this one again. Let me really see whether you can or you cannot do this. I just love these detailed student reports, but you can go on to the next slide. But via the PLC, we basically talked about all the components of these assessments reports. And I was like, oh my God, I was only looking at this as just a way to assign assignments. And I didn't realize how much information was embedded in these reports. So even though there's a lot of things that you can use these reports for, I mainly focus on two things. So again, in the beginning, I only focus on that average score column. But as you can see, like in the second row here, we have a problem average column. This is the one that I use the most. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. But I also love the common wrong answers. So, one of my teachers says, well, I don't use assessments because I can't see the students as they work. And I'm like, I don't really need to. As they are working, it'll pop up that they're actually answering questions, and you can see the common wrong answers. And we can even talk about it during class if we have time. And then, of course, it provides the correct answers for you. I didn't even pay attention to any of that when I was first looking at these reports. So now, because I use the reports to drive my instruction, what I'm mostly focusing on is a problem average row. So I'll look for the problem that had the lowest, thank you. I'll look for the problems that have the lowest percentage of accuracy. And if there was a couple of them, I'll look for the column that has like maybe the most skipped answers, or they requested their answers. So like, for example, in this particular report, 51%, the 51% column is the one that had the lowest average. So I'll click on that problem on the blue part, you're right. So I'll click on the problem and then we can go over it as a class. I'm not sure why it's not popping up, but we can go over it as a class. And then I'll even think,
yeah, sorry.
I don't know if I have to be signed in. Okay. And then I'll even like bring up, okay, well, how do you think we got that -7? Or how do you think they got the -31? Like, we'll use that as a discussion during class. And it's usually the first 5 minutes of my class. I use it almost like as a warm up, but we're going over it together. And so I'm happy that, okay, I'm not just assigning the work to them for them to just do digitally. I'm looking at these reports and I'm using it to essentially help me drive instruction. I'm using it as a warm up the next day. And then if I have a kid that also says something like, well, I didn't really understand that, or, I didn't really know what to do, I'll say, okay, but wait a minute. Is this a different report or the same report, Brian? The same one?
Yep, it's the same one.
Okay, so there's a student, I'm not sure if it's on this report, where the student had spent like 2 minutes and like 42 seconds, but everybody else spent like an average of like 9 minutes and like 17 minutes. And I'm like, dude, you didn't do that individual right there. I'm like, well, you may not have done well because you essentially rushed through it. You didn't really take your time. So I look at all of that. I look at the time that they spent on it, and I go in and I do the work. And so I know if it took me like 7 or 8 minutes to do something, but you only took 2, I'm like, okay, you didn't take this seriously. Next slide.
Forgot the link was there. 1 second.
I know, me too. I think.
Gotta love technology.
I know. So, I didn't touch on the student detail report like I wanted, so you can leave it on the slide for a second, but I wanted to say this one thing too. So on Wednesdays, when we don't teach with our students, if I have a kid that said that they want to have tutorial with me that particular day, because I offer tutorial on Wednesdays, I will go and pull out the, not pull out, but I'll go and open up the reports, and I'll pull up a detailed student report for that particular student. And so some of the problems that they answered incorrectly, right, you can click on that. And I love these. So some of the questions that they answered incorrectly, we can go over each one. And so I use that to like offer tutorials to them so that they can have like their one-on-one individual time to go over these questions that they may not have understood as they were working on them on their own. So I love that. And I love that the PLC gave me the opportunity to learn all of these things and learn all of the things that the report has to offer. From the fall PLC, I also learned about skill builders. Is one of the things that you see when you do go into assessments. I always saw it there, but I didn't know what it was. But skill builders is essentially if you want the students to practice on a particular standard, you just essentially assign that standard, and the student will answer up to 10 questions. Once they get 3 questions correct in a row, then they've essentially mastered that standard and they can move on. But if they don't, they keep trying up to 10 times. And so that just gives them like more practice on the standards. And I love that. So when you are assigning your assessments, don't just do what I did in the beginning. Don't just assign it and say, okay, this is just something that they can go and do digitally and then you're done. And look at the reports, look at the data that it's providing, use it to drive your instruction in whichever way it best suits you. Use it to provide feedback, use it during tutorials. I don't usually do small groups, and I love what Ms. Tigner said earlier of how we can use assessments in small groups. I don't usually use it, but I'm gonna try it. We'll see. One other thing that I love is that from the reports, especially from like the essay ones where they have to explain like how they got to an answer, when I read those sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this person here like solved it this way and it was so cool and I didn't think about that. And so I'll showcase that particular student. I'll say something like, okay, hey, can you explain to the class how you arrived at your answer and what your thought process was? And so I showcase students at times as well. So the last point is that, again, and I mentioned this earlier, time is one of the important components on the report. Students who are rushing through, you can see that. And you see that in your classrooms anywhere where students just kind of want to hurry up and, kind of get through the assignments, but you let them know, okay, it takes time to get through this assignment. If you really want to get a good grasp of understanding what you're doing, you must take your time. So that's all I have to add. And I'm just so excited that, Assessments is here and provides that data that I use every day to help me drive my instructions.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ajoki, for sharing your perspective. It's super valuable. And I know a lot of teachers that we work with have that same experience where they get into assessments, they're assigning, and maybe don't realize at first the value of that report. And so that's definitely something we want to bring out and surface for folks. So thanks again for sharing. Before we move on. Yeah, no problem. So before we move on, a couple of things. First of all, any questions or wonderings or ideas that you have, feel free to share those in the chat. Dawn's going to surface some of those questions and themes from questions in just a minute or so. I did want to take a moment just to highlight what Ajoki was talking about. So if you're in Google Classroom or Canvas, you can go to your assignment list to find your reports. Here, I'm just going to go to an example report that we have. And I just want to highlight a few of the things that Ajoki mentioned. So you have those problem averages, you've got the average score, those common wrong answers, which can be super useful. Your key here, you always have the ability to hide and anonymize student names. And then you've got your individual student rows. And then the other important point here is the amount of time that each student spent, because that's obviously very important. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is that if you click the triple dot next to the student's name, you can click the details report and see that play-by-play, like Ajoki mentioned, that'll show you every attempt the student makes, what answers they put, if it was correct or incorrect, how much time they spent on that attempt. And so this depth of data can really help you to plan your instruction to meet the needs of your individual students.
Brian, can I add one more thing? Okay, so I had a tutor who actually teaches in the same district that I teach in, who was working with one of my students, and she came to me and was like, why is my student, not doing well in your class or not doing well? And so I was able to even use these reports, like, in that meeting when I was meeting with the tutor. But also on that dot, I have this one. So you went before those three dots that you clicked, Brian, to get to the student detail reports, and also have the delete progress. I have this one student, when she takes her assessments, I mean, she takes it so seriously. Like, before I can even go over it with the class, if she didn't score well, she'll say, can I try it again? And so I love that delete progress. I can delete her progress and she'll go back and she'll retry it. And I don't have very many kids that, that ask me to delete their progress, but I do have one in particular that will ask me to let her try it again. And every once in a while, some of my students do want to as well. Sorry, I wanted to chime that in.
No. Again, super valuable to hear that. I know a lot of teachers know those student profiles, so it's important to take that into consideration. And with that, we're going to go ahead and I'll turn it over to Dawn so that she can bring up any questions that have come up in the chat and any probing questions, ideas, or wonderings that you all have. And I'm just going to leave this slide up so that you can reference our two presenters, Donna Lee and Ajoki, if you'd like to direct a question to them specifically. And with that, Dawn.
Yeah, absolutely. I love being on these targeted webinars because even though I'm not in the classroom right now, I just feel like I'm learning so much about like being in the classroom right now. So I'm going to start with a question for Donna Lee. I absolutely love what you said about maintaining the same groups in your small breakout groups to kind of give that like comfort and community feeling, even though students are not in the classroom with their peers at this point. So if a teacher chooses to go in that direction, do you suggest or do you recommend changing the roles of the students within those groups from day to day, or having them maintain that same role?
That's a great question, Dawn. I think that I would recommend keeping them in the same roles as long as they're comfortable, because I think it's more about in these times them interacting as a group more than having to keep switching up their role and make something unstable. You're looking for stability in this world right now. But if on the feedback form you have a student who's really stressed out about being the facilitator, doesn't want to be a leader at all, and you've misjudged putting them in that role because you don't really have a handle of where they're at, then I would recommend, changing it up so that people feel more comfortable. But other than that, I would leave them in those roles for a while until it becomes part of a routine, and then you might venture into that.
Yeah, maybe switching quarterly or on some kind of regular schedule. I think the key of what you're saying is make sure the students kind of anticipate what those changes are going to be so they're comfortable with it.
Yeah, and that they know what the expectations are. So once they really have a chance to learn their role and be really, proficient in it, then I think, if you get that feel that they're kind of getting bored with the role, then, that's the time to start changing it up. But right now, I think it's more about stability and what you can give them that's consistent.
Absolutely. I have a 5-year-old at home, Donna Lee, so you're speaking my language right now. One teacher was asking Donna Lee, how many students would you recommend putting in the breakout room, or just the 4 for those 4 roles, or maybe more?
Well, originally when I designed it, I went with the 4, so 4 in each group. And whatever way you do that, whether it's a breakout room or you're sharing slides, so they're all in front of you on Zoom, but they're technically in their own groups because they're working on a shared slide, I would still say 4 so that they can really have time to explore the information. And I think that gives them something to do, so everybody's not sitting around. And again, that opt-out is important because if somebody is really stressed out about that, especially in the breakout rooms, less so if they're all in the same room working on a shared document, that's usually not a problem. But placing them in a room, even if it's a virtual room, might be really stressful.
Yeah. And someone had just asked, how do you deal with a student who doesn't want to work in groups? And I think you just answered that. Make sure they're involved and they have the opportunity, but maybe they're not going to take one of the schools.
Right. And they can be in the main room and still be involved because remember, they're all doing it individually on assessments too. So they're not going to be contributing to a group slide, but that's okay if they don't feel comfortable with that. They're going to be completing the assignment individually on assessments. And then when the groups share out, they're going to have the benefit of that share too. And I loved what Ajoki did and showing all those reports, Ajoki, thank you, because that's what you're looking at. Those data reports are what you're looking at in real time. So you're monitoring where they're at. And even that student who isn't comfortable in a group, you know whether they're progressing and you can go back to the main room and help them out if they need that.
Awesome. Ajoki, I will say that I am like obsessed with your like Pear Decks like routine. Like I wish I had that when I was in the classroom. It's so organized. It has everything the student needs all in one place. So my question for you is, when you ultimately at some point move back to in-person in the classroom, how do you see your routine changing? Have you rethought about how assessments is going to play a role now that you're in the classroom? And before you answer, I just want to say your progression of just how you have viewed assessments, I think is very similar to a lot of other teachers where they just used it because it was there, and then they kind of adopted the reports, and now it's part of their like ingrained daily routine, and I absolutely love that.
Okay, so I love assessments. I love that. I love what it's all about. And I'm always on your website, like looking up things. And I remember watching a video of a teacher who actually projected the report. And he was going over the report and the questions like with the students as a whole. And I was like, oh my God, this would be so cool if I actually had time to do it. So, because, again, I only have 30 minutes, I am the one that actually goes and analyzes the reports and picks the question that we're going to discuss that day. I don't usually show them the report. So when we go back into the classroom, and now that we've, all been using technology, I'm not moving away from it. So I'm not going to have every student like in the class on a laptop. I'll be projecting or whatever, but I still need them to, still answer questions via Peer Deck or whatever it is. But in the beginning of every class, I plan to do just what that teacher did. I'm going to pull up the report and we're going to analyze that report together as a class. Once we go back to normal, whatever normal will be, I'm assuming that I'll have more class time. And so I'll have more time to actually use that report and use that data as a whole group, as a class, and even small groups if necessary. But from seeing that video that day, I was just like, oh man, I wish I had time to do this. So going back into the classroom, I will definitely be using those reports, maybe the first 10 minutes of class, and moving from there and just making sure that my students really do understand, what they're learning, you know. I hope that answered the question.
Great. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. And Brian, just stop me. I know we had like a prompt question. You think we have time for a couple more group questions?
Yeah, I think if we have a few more questions coming in, we can go ahead and address those, and then we'll want to move on here within the next minute or so.
Yeah, and this is for Donnelly, kind of along the same line of like different instructional models. Are there any thoughts or suggestions that you have about how a teacher who has a hybrid schedule, a hybrid model, or even an in-person schedule might use this breakout box? And I ask because I know that you talk to teachers who are in person, but the students need to be 6 feet apart in the classroom. So group work as a whole is going to look different right now.
Exactly. And I guess that's the answer, Dawn, really, is that the in-person learning and the teachers that I have that are doing that, it's really not in person at all because they are so distant. And some of the teachers in that situation have to be even in a different room from the students. So it's more like a virtual situation. But I think that in the hybrid models, and depending on how your school is set up, it could be helpful for you to do this if you're streaming what you're doing in the classroom. You still could have students participate more as a group virtually with the shared documents in any way that works. So if everyone's not on, virtual, and there are some people in the room that are watching you teach, you still could have them participate in groups with shared documents, I think. And you could relate and tie in that to a hybrid situation. So I guess that would be my answer to that. I think, and any of the resources that I shared, feel free, copy them, modify them, improve upon them. I mean, that's the best thing about assessments. And really, as Brian stated, like go to the teacher corner, look at what's out there, because there's so many different resources, wonderful things that people are sharing and just saying, here, take this. I use this and it works really well for me. One of the students that's doing the skill builders and tracking their student progress, we got the sheet off of someone else's share on the teacher corner out. They were going to be tracking their student progress. So there's all kinds of resources there too.
All right. And just to note, because I know Donnelly has so much information, she does have a blog post in the assistance blog where she kind of talks all about this. All the links that she went through is going to be on there as well.
All righty. Excellent. That was wonderful. And Dawn, thanks for surfacing those questions. And thanks, Donnelly and Ajoki, for your wonderful answers. We appreciate that. So just for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and move on to our recap and next steps. So today we did a quick overview of ASSISTments and why you should use it. We spent some time learning how ASSISTments teachers and coaches have responded to the challenge of teaching during COVID, and also gave folks an opportunity to share and ask questions to learn more and dig a little bit deeper about what they heard in the presentations today. If you're interested, I know some of you may want a refresher, or maybe you're just getting started and you want to learn more. We do have our new user webinar, part 2, a deeper dive on data, coming up on the 23rd at 6:30 p.m. So that's next week. We also have a drop-in help session where you can just come and ask questions. Dawn and I are there, and you can get some more individual time there if you need it. On March 9th, we have our new user webinar part 1, learning the basics. So if you want a refresher on the basics, definitely check that out. And then we're also really excited about our next targeted webinar on March 24th at 3:30. And this is using ASSISTments to support equitable and inclusive math instruction. So if you're interested in those, definitely check that out. The link in the slide here, which again, you will be sent the link in the follow-up email, or the slide deck in the follow-up email. You can always click that to sign up for one of these webinars. In addition, we have our website where you can go and find more resources. I'm just going to go live over here and go to assistments.org. So you can go to our help center where we have a variety of user resources that you can check out that cover all of the different topics intersecting with how to make ASSISTments work with your students and their families. We have our FAQ page, our webinar library where you can access recordings of our webinar sessions, and then that webinar sign up. So you can get sign up for one of those webinars I mentioned from here as well. We also have that teacher corner, which I showed you earlier, and our blog section as well, where you can check out those perspectives from different teachers and other ASSISTments experts. If you're interested in getting involved with ASSISTments more, definitely check out Get Involved. We always have lots of interesting opportunities for teachers to engage in, and we appreciate your perspective in bringing that in to share with our ASSISTments users. Definitely stay in touch. We have our Facebook user community, which we definitely recommend you join. Folks come there to share tips, ask questions, learn from other teachers of a variety of experience levels. And Dawn regularly posts very useful tips and hints and resources that you might find helpful when using ASSISTments. We're also on Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn if you're interested in checking those out. And then if you have questions after today's session, you can always reach out to us at contact@assistments.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. I think, again, based on time, well, I'll go ahead and post this question. So feel free to share in the chat as we do our exit survey here in just a minute. But based on what you learned today, what's your priority next step for supporting students during remote learning with ASSISTments? And Dawn, would you mind just posting the question in the chat as well?
I sure will.
Okay, excellent. So Dawn's going to post that in the chat, and also she's going to post this next piece, which is really important. It might not even take a minute, it might take 30 seconds, but just take a moment to give us feedback on today's session. We really appreciate it, and we use all the feedback that we get to drive improvements to our professional learning moving forward. So we definitely appreciate any feedback you can offer. Just want to note that the webinar date is the 17th, and that the title of the webinar is Teaching During COVID, Lessons from the Fall from ASSISTments Teachers. And while you're working on that, I noticed a question about certificates coming in. Those of you in attendance will receive, in addition to the follow-up email with the slide deck and the recording, you will also get a certificate showing your attendance in the session. Okay, and with that, we appreciate everybody that joined us today. We are definitely happy to answer any questions you have. I love that some folks are already posting in the chat that their next step is that they want to analyze data, take a look at those reports. That honestly is one of the most important parts about using our platform, because when you look at that detailed data report, you can, and you get used to it, you can quickly identify those teacher moves, those interventions, those one-on-one conversations that you need to have, and really meet the students where they are and support them as they grow and learn. All right. And with that, Dawn, unless there are any other questions, we are all set for today.
We are. I think we're good.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks again for